Yeah, to the audience once again, thank you so much for being here on our 2 year anniversary. Like I was saying previously, we have never missed a single stream. All right, 2 years, not one. We're always here. We're always around providing content. But we do that for the people who are supporting this community, right? It's all of them that allows me to do this. Like Boji there, gifting a sub to Tubi, really kind of her. But yeah, thank you for the ones who've been supporting. Thank you for the ones who just come and been enjoying this content that we've been trying to provide. Thanks to the ones who like help make this content, right? Like the people here, and thank you to the new people to the panel, right? We've got a few new people, and thank you to the guests who like keep showing up, like week after week, day after day, sometimes multiple times per week. No, seriously, shout out to you guys. I couldn't do this without you. This channel is like a team effort. It's a community effort. Like it's for the community. We like let people who are within Twitch, who have a political opinion, right, or a cultural opinion, and want to share it, want to yell about it with strangers, right? The best kind of people, I think. We give them a platform to do that, but we can't, we can't make that happen without one, their participation, and two, the people at home who are, who value this and decide I'm going to support this and keep this alive for another day. So we've been doing this for 2 years, and I'm really proud of the community that we've built. Shout out to this community that's been here again and again and again. It's really nice to have people around, to see people in chat, who like I can recognize so many of your names because you guys are always here chatting it up. Like it when I start the stream and I see like a bunch of like names, people just talking, whether it's either about what's about to happen or just anything, just sharing their day, right? That's a really good feeling, especially when I see people who are regularly here, just showing up, being a part of this continuously, right? Like just like sharing their day with us. That's a really, really good feeling. I can't tell you that makes me feel, right? So thank you all. 2 years would not be possible. When I turned on the camera the first time, so May 1st is actually, so technically the anniversary was yesterday, but like this crowd is my usual crowd, so I saved the celebration for now. Thank you, Bushi, for 10 subs. You're amazing. Holy crap. Thank you seriously. But when I turned on the camera the first time, I didn't think that we would have anything close to the success that we've had so far. I didn't plan on doing panels. That was never the plan. We just fell into it by complete accident, and people seem to like it, so we just kept doing it. And we can only keep doing it because we keep coming back. If you would look at the people here, right? None of these people, it's interesting, none of these people would have been here 2 years ago. Like there's always successive generations of people who come and go, right? So all the people who like were originally on this, they've all gone their own ways, and we thank them for their time. And if you come back another year, you may not recognize anyone on the panel again, but we're still here. I'm still here.
I'll be here.
You'll be here. Lots of people say that and then they're not. That's okay. Thank you for that. But yeah, I'm still here, right? Like literally the only face that's a constant is mine. But that's because you guys allowed me to do that. So thank you to people like Boshi, who are constantly helping. We're at level 3 hype train. Let's see if we get to level 4. Sub to the channel, gift bits or gift subs. Use your Amazon Prime / Prime Gaming to get us to level 4 hype train to support this channel. So again, I can keep doing all of this for all of you, right? So another year can go by and I will still be here, right? Like having my my blood pressure raised by people like Bam, right? Whoever the next Bam is. sure. Okay. Thanks so much, and let's start the show. Hooray! All right. Anyway, this is the Reverie Roundtable, which we do Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern. We've never missed a Reverie. You know that? Since we started, we've literally never missed a Reverie. No other channel can say that. Like, always Monday, always here. Anyways, right. Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern. We have a fantastic group of individuals here. Some usual faces, some newer faces. Let's introduce them. We'll start with Sam Law, H9H9, who was here with us on Saturday. Had a good time with them. Sam Law, how are you?
Thanks. I'm doing great. I'm enjoying my time. It's finals week, and I don't have a final today. And I'm happy to be here with Prime on his 2-year anniversary.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. And thank you, Tone School, for helping out that hype train. Paying for the sub they got from Doobie. Oh, awfully kind of you. Thank you, for gifting that sub. We're at level 3 hype train. We're almost, well, not even close, but still, let's see if we can get to level 4 hype train. 90 seconds left on the clock. Sub to channel, gift bits or gift subs. All right. Next we have Lactoid, who is becoming a regular fixture here, and I'm very happy with that because I really like talking to them, despite the outrageous things they say, right? And in a soft demeanor, right? Like, he doesn't come off as a person who's going to say the things he says, but he does any which way, right? Another doobie, really. So, Lactoid, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Prime. I am Lactoid, the bane of leftists. I do law and politics. It's great to be here. You can find me on Anti-Communism United on Discord or Twitch. Happy 2-year anniversary.
Thank you so much. Death of Certainty / Wick. Definitely a regular face here, right? And always because they're a great person. Great person to interact with, to talk to, just to hang out with. So thank you, Wick, for spending time here.
Well, thanks for having me. 2 years, wow, that's quite an accomplishment. Congratulations. And what better present can Prime give to himself than to invite me on a panel with him to talk about the subjects? What better way to celebrate? Oh, I know a better way. To sub to his channel right now, to donate, and to show him that you support him supporting me, which is really what this is all about, supporting me. I like to take other people's issues and celebrations and then turn them to how they can benefit me. That's what I like to do. You can find me at twitch.tv/ Death of Certainty, but you can also find me here a lot. Thank you for having
me. Thank you. Thanks so much, Wick. Seriously, Wick's a great guy. We love him, right? Our friend Boji in chat loves him too, right? I'm glad I'm glad he gets nothing but love from my community. All right, we'll go to. She'll never donate to me again. We'll go to my friend Cricket Style J. We don't see him here often, but like, he's another good person to talk to. Really like him a lot. How are you, Cricket?
Thank you. I'm doing okay. Yeah, I'm Cricket Style J on Twitch and Discord. I'm just an opinionated guy who likes to hang around and talk with you all. So thanks for having me, Prime, and congratulations on your 2 years.
You. All right. Next person. Brand new face to our closed panels. It's come on like once or twice to open panels. But I've talked to him a few times. It seems like a good guy. Leontes? Was that how you pronounce it?
You're almost
Leontes?
there.
Okay, great. Yeah, please. Tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Leontes. I've been awake for almost 24 hours, so if I seem tired, that's why. And that's about it. I mean, I have YouTube, Twitch, but I don't do political stuff. So I do gaming. But yeah, been up for a long time, but I'm up and I'm here for you, Prime, because I missed the last 2 you invited me to, and I felt bad, and I was like, you know what, I got to be here. So I'm here.
I appreciate it. Let's see how long you survive, right? You don't it seems like you have any backing there, right? So like if you'll fall asleep, it's straight
back on the hard floor, right?
All right. Next we have Zonia. Zonia, special person to this community, right? Well loved and for good reason. Is here. Thank you for being around, Zonia. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you for having me on again, Prime. It's great to be on a panel with all these wonderful people here, these beautiful faces. I'm Zonia. You can find me at Zonia Dead on Twitch. And I do some political commentary. Mostly my takes are like pretty much lukewarm, enlightened centrist, or maybe far right, like Nazi sympathizing, or maybe far left, like, Stalin standing kind of takes. It just depends on who you ask, right? So I'm here to I'm here to basically validate all the really weird rumors about me. But I always enjoy being in here on the panel with these guys, and especially Prime's chat. You guys are the best.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next, we have Black American Made here with us once again. His name is Bam, right? I have, despite my better judgment, I made this man a regular. I reach out every time. No, Bam is amazing, right? I give him shit all the time, but Bam is actually one of the absolute best. Bam, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, always, as always, thanks for having me. I'm the person that's gonna give the correct take. It's gonna get argued over for a while, like everybody's gonna hate it, but deep down, they know I'm right. Y'all know my stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. And last but not least, right, one of the people, shout out to Doobie here, right? And I'll keep shouting him out. Doobie puts a lot of work into this channel. He helps out a ton, right? If I was to rank the amount of like work put into this, it'd be me, one other person, and then Doobie, right? In terms of like helping make this all happen. So thank you, Doobie, our Dark Lord and Savior, for being here once again. Doobie, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. And everything Ben said just now is wrong. I'm the one who's gonna have the correct take on everything. He's an idiot. Don't listen to him. Okay, we'll continue.
Thank you so much. Let's get started. Topic 1. Has the mainstream media been overblowing the threat of Stop the Steal Republicans? Is it fair to say, assume that they will undermine democracy if given the opportunity in 2024? And if so, what should be done about them? If they are truly a threat, should we deny them office? Yeah. So, yeah, there's been a lot of talk about people who are saying that, Biden's an illegitimate president and that the election was a sham. Those people are running for office in sensitive positions, like Secretary of State, like in various states, right? The state Secretary of State was really confusing, but anyway, and that position is in charge of elections. There's, I think, the article I shared with the panel showed 19 of those people. 19 are running for those positions, and if we had another close election, who knows what'll happen, right? So, like, one, is their threat overblown in general, not just for these possibly elected officials? And if it's not overblown, then what should we do about these people? Right, they are an actual threat at that point. So we'll start with H9. How are you?
Quick interjection. It's actually 23 people in 19 states running for those positions.
Thank you for that. Very useful. H9, your intro.
Just to hit on the point, when the media is discussing Stop the Steal Republicans, yes, they're blowing it out of proportion. But that's just the media doing media stuff. There are some serious problems with the idea that the government can be overthrown. We have to squash that out of the gate. The government can or should not be overthrown, or cannot and shouldn't be overthrown. The idea that we can just have a small minority of people to go around and like control these special like Secretary of State positions, or I think every Secretary of State position controls the election process in the states. We cannot let these people control or dictate what we do in the future. And I think it's that simple. So, but yes, the media is slightly overblowing it.
Okay. Let's go to Electoral.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's overblown. I do think the system has pretty demonstrably proven that by the rules set, Joe Biden did win the election. I think there's some policies that people can rally in favor of if they're worried about election fraud, or if they think that the rules are unfair. They can advocate for things like voter ID or removal of ballot harvesters. But as to the question of the politicians, the people running for office who believe it was stolen, I do think that they are allowed to believe what they want under the First Amendment. And I think it's sort of a dark irony here that we are considering not counting the people who vote for them because they have a belief that votes were manipulated. I would actually argue it provides them with a pretty good argument that, well, I mean, obviously you guys are willing to, rig elections against us, so why wasn't it before too?
Like,
So when it comes down to it, I actually disagree that the media is overblowing it. I think that there is a real and present threat for the certain people that are trying to game the system in the future by putting people in positions of power over who gets to count the votes, who gets to run these things. That said, I do think that it would be irony is the best word in order to protect democracy, to remove the ability to do democracy from certain groups and things would be a weird way of going into it. It would feed into the oppressor narrative that these people already have. It would validate them in a way that they've never been validated before if we decide that just because they have views that we find odious or noxious, that even the people, if the people in their district vote for them, we have to respect the will of the people, even if we strongly disagree with it. That said, I would strongly oppose the elections of these people in the way that we are supposed to do it in a democracy, by pushing back against their elections and getting their opponents elected instead. If we start to make policies or put prescriptions on these things, like, well, you can run for office, but if you have an opinion we don't like, even if you win the election, we're not going to honor it. A very dangerous road. I would oppose that 100%.
thank you. Cricket.
Yeah, everybody who participates in democracy, everybody who upholds democracy, everybody who defends democracy needs to have confidence that the system is functioning properly, or else those things aren't worth doing. So anything that undermines confidence in the functioning of our elections is a danger to the system. Every time people make these kind of accusations that an election was stolen, it increases the likelihood that people will continue to believe that future elections were stolen. How bad is the threat right now? I think that remains to be seen. I do not believe that our democracy is fatally wounded, but I believe it could get there if things get much worse. Should we keep these people out of office? Yeah, we should vote against them, and that's how we should keep them out of office. That's it.
Leon.
Yeah, so to the first question, I mean, personally, I don't think it's overblown. I do see it as a pretty big threat, but that's just anyone's opinion. To the second, is it safe to assume they would undermine democracy? I mean, I just look at what they said in the article, which is that if they were in these positions of power that have control over certifying the elections, they would have not certified the election. And I do see that as undermining democracy, even though they try to backtrack and say, well, in 2024, if there's not enough evidence, of course, we'll certify the election if it goes against us. I mean, they said there was not enough evidence to prove that 2020 election was stolen, so they kind of contradict themselves there. So it's safe to say that maybe you can't really take them at their word. And as far as the third question goes, should we keep them out of office? We shouldn't mandate them to stay out of office. I agree with everyone else. We need to oppose these people, and we need to oppose the kind of fear-mongering populist wave that these people ride on into power. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sonia.
Yeah, so a lot of good positions here so far. Definitely my position has been that it seems like the media is definitely overblowing it to some degree, and the fear-mongering is absolutely palpable. From my position, there's definitely something to be worried about, because we have 23 people in 19 different states who do believe that the election was stolen. They would not have certified the election, or somewhere thereabouts, and who are now running for state secretary or secretary of state. And this is going to create, like, we have already a couple of problems that are going on here. I think the biggest one, though, is the media's kind of hyperbolizing of it, is chipping away at voter confidence on both sides, because they're going to make people who believe that the election was fair is going to be stolen by right-wing extremists. And those those people who were saying that they wouldn't certify the election if they get this position are probably very likely also going to feel like there's like a tide moving against them. So absolutely, I think the fear mongering needs to be dialed down a bit. but there's definitely something to be concerned about that needs to be explored, and we need to push for people for getting candidates in that are actually supportive of our democracy.
Okay. All right. Black American made.
Okay. No, yeah. Is it like hyperbole? Is it overblown? Absolutely not. Like, and I used to feel that way. I used to actually legitimately feel that way. That I was like, I don't know. People talk about these things, but not like actual politicians. That's just them like pandering. But I know real people running for real offices, like, and not just Secretary of State, but people running for like just standard Congress, people running for senators, like off the top of my head, and I'll say their names because they're public figures. Like I know a dude named Christian Lamar running in Arizona. He's probably gonna get 12 votes, but like he is full out like insanely like whatever Trump says goes. Like it gets pretty bad. They would there are legitimate people in positions of power or who are going for positions of power, who would absolutely undermine democracy at the drop of a hat if given opportunity. As far as what we do about them, I think I don't think there's anything we can do besides raise awareness. Like it would be so fundamentally anti-American to say that like these people, as insane as they are, like aren't given the same freedom and opportunity to run to change the Constitution. I don't know, that would feel really weird, but yeah, I guess that's what we'll get into.
Damn it! Like, the only person I can agree with here is fucking Bam. Like, ugh, guys, you're already failing me.
What are you talking? Did you not listen to my open? He said what I said. Anyway, go on.
Okay, Doobie, please.
So I think it is a bit overblown, but I think what's more interesting to me is the like kamikaze style devotion to mob rule demonstrated by people who think that these candidates shouldn't be kept off the ballot. I think the latest polls we have on the 2020 election tell us that the majority of Republicans think it was illegitimate. Massive amounts of independents and even some Democrats think this was illegitimate. And I think that if you care about the nation, the people that the democratic system is meant to support and protect, you really are throwing the baby out with the bathwater if you cling to the democratic ideal so much you're willing to let fucking insane people into power to protect this ideal rather than the nation. I think the nation is more important than the democracy, right? So if we need to throw out the democracy to protect the nation, I think that's what we should do. And this seems like a case where the democracy or the democratic ideal here is not helping us. So we shouldn't let these people run for office. They're fucking crazy. Seems simple to me.
That'll be fun to talk about.
Yeah.
But I'll give my opinion real quick. Yeah, so I don't think this is being overblown, like at all. Like, how could it be? I feel like this is an example of us having a very short memory span, right? Like, like Donald Trump tried to institute a constitutional crisis, right? Like that's what the January 6th riots were about. Like trying to institute. People forget about that part. Like there was like the violent storming of the Capitol, which sucked. That was terrible. There were people going down the hallways chanting "Hang Mike Pence," which is also terrible. But they forget why they were doing that in the first place. They wanted to like to replace like the slate of electoral college with a different one, right? Like just toss out democracy, the rules, right, and put people there who would just like Donald Trump and say fuck the votes. That's what they were doing, right? We have a person who like he called a Secretary of State, again, an important position in Georgia, right, and asked him to find more votes for me. Find more votes. Just find 13,000 more votes. Just do that, right? What if that had been one of his people? Well, would we even know that a phone call happened? Because the guy just happened to be like recording this, right? He recorded that conversation. Now we know Donald Trump made that request, but would we have even known that would have happened? Would he have gone along? This other person, would they have gone along with Trump's request? Like we're talking about the heart of democracy, the vote, the integrity of the vote. How like the media is barely talking about the danger, barely talking about how this is overblown. I don't understand how you guys could arrive at that conclusion at all. So I'm really curious what you all have to say.
I think only a couple of us said that it was overblown, right? I think
Yeah,
most of us
I
actually
said
agreed with your take.
I said the fear mongering was a problem, but there was definitely something to be concerned about that we needed to pay attention to. I don't know if I said overblown. I probably was
Talking about how the media is doing it.
well, I was talking more about like sensationalizing and such and fear
Yeah.
mongering based around that.
But-
But no, I think there's
Well,
definitely a
we-
concern.
look,
But the thing
we-
is, Doobie, you're talking about suspending democracy, right? Like so you're talking about like the president potentially implementing emergency powers to suspend like the election or something.
No,
So
I'm saying
if-
that these specific people shouldn't be allowed to run for office.
So
How do you go about
that's a very
disallowing?
difficult thing to implement when basically there's no mechanism to do that right now, unless we
Yeah, I
5150 them all.
Yeah, I agree that there's no mechanism. I mean, so far as I know, there's no mechanism to do it right now. But I think
So-
a mechanism should be created through which we can disallow people from running for office for being fucking crazy.
Yeah,
Well,
any
little
If
too
you
late for
find
that
out somebody's like a
right now.
flat earther or is liking QAnon shit on Facebook, they shouldn't be able to run for office.
Well, the
any
election is the
mechanism,
mechanism.
just real quick,
right?
any mechanism that we put in place is going to be inevitably used against once people like Trump do get into power and things again, and which will, with a high likelihood, happen at some point in the future. They're going to use that mechanism. They're just going to say, well, oh, you believe in socialism? That's crazy. So we're not going to let you run for office.
Yeah, there are
No,
plenty of
they'll
weirdo
use it on
lefties that I wouldn't
trans-
want in office
they'll use it
either.
on
I wouldn't
trans
allow
people.
AOC to run for office because she's fucking
I
crazy.
understand that you wouldn't, but thankfully you're not in charge yet, and we oppose our Dark Lord and Savior in certain ways, and this is one of the
Look,
ways where I strongly disagree with you.
Well,
Dude.
I-
this is
I
the
just
problem
say
though. So like
if
if you
Doobie-
guys are like lefties that are opposed to Trump and Trump's minions getting into power, why wouldn't you support enacting some or come up with some kind of mechanism to get rid of these people when they try to run for office? Why is
Because
democracy more important than the nation you're trying to protect?
Because without democracy, I don't really care about the nation that much. I'm just going to say it.
Why?
I like this nation. I like this nation because it's a democratic nation, because of the good things that it does for its citizens and things like that. And if we take all those things away, if we kill democracy to save democracy, it doesn't matter. Democracy's dead.
He can kill
And,
democracy to save the nation, to protect the people, right? You still have all those great things. You just won't
But
have
democracy
So what do you mean by
crazy
protects the
kill?
people more than
Define-
getting into power
democracy
and fucking
over
things
the
everywhere
long
for you.
term. Over the long term, democracy does more to protect the people than any kind of mechanism or something to keep the crazies out.
All right, Doobie,
I
like
don't-
explain where you're coming from and like what you would envision as some mechanism to control this.
I think that you could have a panel of some sort, a bipartisan panel, that would go through someone's history, criminal history, public posts on Facebook and Twitter, the kind of political activism they've been engaged in, and determine whether or not this person is a threat to the safety of the nation. And if they are, they don't get to run. And that could be as simple as, in college they're part of some disgusting communist group. In high school, they were posting 1488 shit all over the place. I don't want these people running for office. I don't want, if you're a QAnon
People
person,
grow out of this
right?
stuff.
I don't
dude.
want you running for office. If you're so I think
should've
that
seen me
the
when
kind
I
of
was
shit
a
that you're doing, your shit that you're doing as a teenager, is indicative of your way of thinking as an adult, right? I don't think teenagers are just like
No.
brain dead. Right? So
No, I'm
I
a
think there are
very
plenty. I
different
think there are
person
plenty of
from when
really
I was-
intelligent people out there who didn't get the urge to post Nazi shit around or to become a communist or whatever the fuck. There are plenty of good people in the country that we can find. We don't need to go to the dregs.
Damn it, Prime, do you hear this? I'm irredeemable. I probably shouldn't even be voting right now. This is what Doobie thinks of me.
All right, well, Doobie, I think you're kind of, underestimating these people. I mean, they are populist opportunists who are latching on to a hot button issue within their party in order to obtain power. And I think based on their statements that they've said, you can't really take them at their word. I honestly don't even believe that they think the election was stolen. I don't think they're crazy. I think they're opportunists who want power, and they'll say what they need to say to obtain it, because that is, the way of populism.
Well, I think there's some of
I'm
that going
sure
on too.
s-
And
I'm
this is
sure
why I said
some
that
of
I
them
think it's a
believe
bit
it and some of them
overblown.
don't.
Yeah, that's why I said I think it's a bit overblown, but because I'm sure some of that is happening. But I think we shouldn't dismiss the ability of people in this nation to be fucking stupid, right? And like I said earlier, every poll that we have on this topic says that the vast majority of the Republican Party thinks the 2020 election was illegitimate.
And
That Trump
Right, and
actually
those are the people you go
I don't
after.
think they're all faking, and I think that within that group of people, there are people with the ability to run for office, right? So I don't think we should just dismiss it all as them
You don't go
fandom-
after
And-
the
and we've
candidate, you go after
seen-
the voter, Doobie.
And we've seen what happens when we let crazy in, right? It's like Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't tone down much when she finally got elected. She kept the crazy going. So a lot of people said they're like, oh, she's just playing the whole game and riding on the coattails of Trump and all and the QAnon stuff, but she'll tone it down when she gets into office. No, she kept the crazy going. So it's too dangerous to lean on the idea that maybe some of them are LARPing just to get the votes, right?
I knew my district rep was gonna come in, and at some point to this conversation, yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene is, she is homegrown and full of crazy. She is very representative of the area I'm from, and it's not good. Like I don't believe people are faking. Like I used to believe that. I used to think like, oh, like there's the average citizen may not be super aware, but once you go into politics, like you've like bypassed that. Like from at that point, like you know what's going on. But no, these people legitimately feel this way about things, and they would legitimately undermine democracy. Like, wow. I was right where y'all were until I started meeting people who were actually senators and House members and state reps. Like, no, just because you've won an election does not make you I guess I would say qualified for the position.
This is
Certainly.
why
And
we
I-
need public health care and we need to bolster mental health support,
Therapy
right?
is very important.
Mental health and public health care.
Yeah, I just want to say I don't disagree with anyone here that this is a problem. It's a serious problem. It's a huge issue, and the fact that a majority of the people in your area think these things is an issue. The question comes in: how do we fix this? What is the cure? And I think any suggestion that we should limit the democracy of people who we think are crazy is a prevention. The cure is worse than the disease. In that point, that's a step too far. Like, we need to address it, right? But we need to address it most importantly in the right ways. In the Hippocratic Oath, it's the first thing you say is do no harm, right? I hope I got that right. But it's do no harm. And I think any kind of mechanism or policy put into place that would prevent the crazies, quote unquote, from getting into office and to disenfranchise the voters who are in that area who happen to have this belief is going to do a lot of harm to our democracy. And
Wait,
the
hold
ways
on,
that I
but
outlined
allowing them
before.
to vote is doing harm to the nation. I don't understand why you
That's
keep
one of the
the
risks of
democracy.
freedom, right? That's
you
one of
keep-
the risks of
Okay,
freedom. That
no,
the people
no,
won't
it's
always
not.
choose the right thing.
You can be free without getting your grab little fingers on every policy decision. Okay, you don't need to vote on everything. Right? I don't understand why you're putting the democracy, this concept, above the safety of the nation.
Okay,
Because
so there is
democracy
a problem.
the safety of the nation in the long term, and where these short-term solutions might work in the short term, in the long term is going to lead to even worse things.
There is a
Why would you
problem
think
with
that?
implementing these kind of measures because inevitably these will end up being weaponized against people like myself, trans people, right? And as well, people who have had a history of depression or something, or people who have even managed like bipolar disorder or something, will end up inevitably getting swept up in this. And right now, it's not uncommon that a large portion of society has diagnosed and treated and managed mental health issues, who will inevitably end up getting swept up by something like this. So it would actually be very harmful to democracy. So I don't think there's a safe way
I really
to.
don't see that as an issue.
I also think it would.
If
I
that
think
people
it
was
would do the
serious-
opposite of what you wanted.
If
to do. Like,
there's a person with serious mental health issues, why should
No,
they
I
be
said
voting?
managed, right? So, like, for instance,
Managed or not.
if you have a history of major depression, but it's actually being properly managed through medication and maybe therapy or something.
Okay, then
Or-
what would be the
or if
issue
you-
with requiring that they get some kind of certification that says that it's being managed properly before they're able to vote?
I don't know. I think
Because
voting is way too important to society.
Inevitably, ideology will always taint these things, right? So you're going to have people who are going to be like, ew, trans girl, I'm not going to sign off on this, right? So that's the problem with that. You basically have to leave this whole thing open-ended. As soon as you start restricting, inevitably people's ideology is going to become a gating factor as to who gets qualified and who doesn't.
Yeah, I was also gonna say.
Lactoid. And do you have your? I need alpha palms. Okay. Lactoid, then H9, then cricket, and then
Yeah.
bam.
So just a couple questions. Doobie, you started off by saying that the nation is more important than this democracy, and that mob rule, that a lot of people are just sort of wedded to this idea of mob rule and at the expense of the nation. I think the problem though with this line of logic is that when we're talking about either disenfranchising people for the opinions they have, or whether or not their opinions are anti-democratic, ultimately the question is democracy, not about nation. Because if we were to go with what you're saying, let's say I cared more. Let's say I used your logic and I say, well, I care more about the nation than democracy. That's why Trump should have won, even if he didn't get the most votes. Because sure, it would have been undemocratic, but the nation's much better off with Trump than Biden. And if that was my position, where I'm taking the pro-nation, anti-democratic position, then I mean, how is that different than what you said about putting the nation above democracy? Wouldn't a Trump supporter be doing that in their mind as well if they're saying, screw democracy, just get Trump in there?
Yeah, of course. And this was the logic used by a lot of people in January 6th, right? Even people who thought he legitimately lost the election were there because they thought that Biden was going to destroy the country, right? So they were there to try to get their man in office because they thought that would be best for the nation.
Sure.
When a lot of people genuinely believe that it was stolen, their democracy was being stolen and taken away or whatever. So yeah, it's reasonable that crazy people could have the same line of thinking. But I don't think that doesn't mean we just can't dismiss him as fucking crazy. I think any reasonable person looking at Trump's behavior over this term, and the various crimes he's allegedly committed, was that this is probably not the person we want in charge of the nation, right? And he should have been taken out way sooner. It shouldn't have taken this fucking election with historic turnout on both sides to get this crazy person out of office, because he has a base of loyal fucking crazy people in the nation that are going to keep voting for him no matter what the fuck he does.
Look,
Right,
Doobie, if we're just gonna if we're gonna go along with this and just say who should be I mean, I would just say I don't care if Jo Jorgensen got the least votes. She gets in office because she would have been best for the nation. And
Yeah.
I could, and you could say I could have the position, but that's
I
my
feel
position.
like we're basically
hold on, but this
defeating
is
the
why-
entire ethos of American
Hold
democracy,
on,
right?
hold on.
As soon as
We got a
start
few people who we gotta
All
get to first. So Doobie, finish your point. Then we're gonna H9. Quick style, Jane, bam.
Yeah, but this is Zonia, exactly that. I think that the ethos of American democracy is broken. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense, and we should move towards something else. I think the fact that these people, some of these people, stand a serious chance of getting into office around this country, and as Secretary of State, where they can manipulate the voting laws to get their guy in office, or to make it harder for the other side to win elections, right? It just demonstrates how fucked up this democratic system is. And the fact that you people are on here defending their ability, their right, quote unquote, to run for election, to win office, and to do that thing which you'd all agree would be terrible for the country, it just again demonstrates how fucked up the democratic system is and how much we need to move to something else.
If you only care about the rights of the people you agree with, you don't care about rights.
I gotta get some other people. H9.
All right. We can kick people out of these elected offices. Congress has kicked out 20 people in the time Congress has been around. And we have to fix this idea that the American system is stealable. The American system is the opposite of stealable. Trump and his cronies tried so fucking hard every step of the way to find any place they could wiggle their way in and steal this. They tried so hard. I think we have to, when you have this idea that the American system is stealable, and you get this from the left and from the right, people on the left also believe this, like, oh my God, a rich Republican is going to come in and do crazy things. This idea that the election system is fallible is so wrong. There is no proof of election fraud anywhere in any type of federal election. There's just not. You can ask I'll ask everyone here, is there any proof of federal election fraud? Doobie, you got one dead person voting in Pennsylvania. Put your hand down.
That's not what I'm okay, because I don't think what we're talking about here is election fraud when we're talking about people getting to the office of Secretary of State and changing election rules.
It's the idea that people
make it much harder for people to vote.
I know, but it's the idea that the election is stealable. They're only voting for these people, or they're only people only having these ideas is because they thought the Democrats stole it from the Republicans, and the Democrats think the Republicans are stealing it from the Democrats. This is not happening. It can't happen. No one is doing this. No actual Republican or Democrat is really actually trying to steal the election besides Trump. And we got him out of office, and he could run again, which is really scary.
In 16, the same thing happened with Hillary Clinton and Trump, right?
Yes,
you can look like Trump. Yeah, no, you can look into that, right? Trump got elected. There was riots. People were urging the Electoral College not to vote for Trump, and currently Hillary Clinton is still saying Trump stole the election. So I mean, it's not just Trump.
What are the reasons that?
No, I meant. I'll get to you, Wick, after I get to the last.
Sure.
Sure. Cricket Style J, Bam, then Wick.
Yeah, so basically, I think we've seen a lot of public outrage and a lot of really bad outcomes whenever you have non-democratic groups undermining the results of elections, right? So you might remember there was a whole bunch of uproar when Bernie Sanders was running for office, and people perceived that the insiders in the Democratic Party were essentially preventing him from getting these nominations. And you know, similarly, these Stop the Steal people, they believe that Trump really did get more votes, and they believe that there's like some cabal of people in the Democratic Party that are preventing the election results from happening, right? So now these are things that they believe are happening kind of behind the scenes. But I think what Doobie is suggesting is just for the same thing to happen out in the open. It's just we want to have a panel of people whose job it is to openly override or prevent certain election results. I imagine people would be really, really mad about that. I think a lot of the bad outcomes that you would get from all this Stop the Steal stuff would only be worse if we had a system like that. But anyway, I also want to ask, I imagine, Doobie, you probably think this panel of people should not be democratically elected, or, you know, so as to avoid the same problem recurring with them?
Yeah, I wouldn't have them democratically elected.
Okay, where did they come from? Like, who's appointing them?
Like a more technocratic style system.
Okay,
I'd prefer no democracy at all, if it were possible.
All right. Well, I mean, if you have no democracy, if you prefer no democracy at all, then perhaps you're on the same side, incidentally, with a lot of these Stop the Steal people. Of course, you could still believe that they're delusional and bad for the country.
That's what I was saying.
While being on the same side as them. But
let's see, Doobie, what is it? Where are you going? Are you going like stakeholder republic, sole stakeholder republics?
I've written out like a whole system of government a few times. I don't have it like on my PC, but basically, yeah, like I'm imagining a very technocratic system with committees run by experts in every field, and these committees are working together, and with very minimal input from the public. I don't think the average person's duty should be to affect the way that the government is run. That seems like, again, why would I want Wick's opinion on climate change policy? Why would I want Prime's opinion on, you know, where to put the next road in town? Like that, he probably doesn't know very much about it. No, that's totally
you're
fine.
attacking the idea of direct democracy. We don't have direct democracy in America.
No, we
have a democracy where these same dumbasses would vote a guy into office for liking the way he looks or the way he speaks or his ad campaign, or in whatever fucking promises he's giving them. So they vote that guy into the office, and he does all the dumb shit, and he's probably some kind of dumbass lawyer or some other like jackass that really has no connection whatsoever to what the public actually need. So like it's even worse in direct democracy in a lot of ways.
Okay, let's go to Bam. Let's go to Bam. We gotta Bam, Wick, line test, and then we put Usonia.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily about that last part. Although I've always thought about like the idea of a technocracy, but I agree with Doobie's point before that like whenever I'm talking about like overthrowing democracy, I'm not talking about Stop the Steal. I'm not talking about like them denying election outcomes. I'm talking about way before that. I'm talking about changing the ways that elections run in states, which by like making it more difficult to vote. Just like even the person I was talking about before, Christian Lamar, like I was looking at his campaign page, and he had like 9 things he wanted to change about voting, and none of them were even like we're like super feasible. Like he wants like not only do you have a regular ID, like only people with like a voting ID should be allowed to vote. The time for registration, you have to like show up and sign a registration in person. You have to. There will be no form of like voting. Crap. All votes will be in person except for outside of military. Like there, when I think I've only missed one even local election since I've been 18, and I've also only been to the polls once. I just don't, it doesn't make sense for me to go to the polls. I always have done mail-in ballots for everything. So like that would legitimately obviously I think I care enough about elections that I would make the travel, but I know a lot of people like that would legitimately like super hinder their ability to participate in elections. And yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I think America is a pretty solid country overall. Like I don't believe America would fall into fascism overnight the way people would lead you to believe, but I do think there is like it would be super feasible to just change the way we think of elections in a way that we consider to be legal and constitutional.
So there is a
it's your turn. Yep. Wick, and then.
Okay, so there's a term that Bill Maher likes to use. They call it the slow-moving coup, and basically, what it means is that the powers that be in the Republican Party, or at least that are beholden to Trump, are putting people in office, removing the people who were barriers to them last time, right? The ones who stood up and said, "No, I'm not going to do that, sir. I'm not going to find these votes. I'm not going to go against these principles." What they're trying to do is replace those individuals with people who will be yes men in these things. And so far more than just policy decisions about voting ID and things like that, that is also a method that they are trying to use. They are also replacing public figures who are in charge of these institutions. Whether they're going to be successful or not at that is an open question. It is something that, however, I think everyone needs to know about. Everyone needs to be clear on what is happening so that we can oppose it and so that we can hold these people to account. I think that when it comes to Doobie's little kind of trolling, kind of technocracy thing, that's another issue. Democracy in and itself, even though I think that I don't know much about road systems or infrastructure, I do know enough to recognize when people are experts at the thing. And I think that having a representative democracy, so I have some sort of say in the laws that affect me, is a great thing. It has done more for freedom than any other thing besides maybe capitalism. So,
Leon and Sonia.
Right. So as far as Doobie goes, Doobie, I love you. But if we go down the route of like what type of government we have, we'll never get anywhere in this conversation. We live in a democratic system. We need to solve it democratically. And how do we do that? Compromise. We solve these issues with compromise. We go after the voters and we compromise with them. We meet their lowest threshold that they ask for, which is voter ID. I think we should meet that. And I think if we meet that requirement, we will cleave off a lot of those people who feel like the elections are illegitimate. Because when it comes to a democracy, you have two things. H9 had brought up half the battle perfectly. It's our institutions are secure. There is no fraud that has been widespread, and that's half the battle. The other half is the people's faith in this institution. We need to go after those people. We need to compromise with them and meet their lowest threshold to get them onto the right side.
I mostly agree. Yep.
And Zonia.
And I am kind of in agreement with Leon for some stuff. Like, I wanted to say, yeah, Doobie, we can't grapple with what you're proposing just because it's so fictitious in our current union, right? So there's no way for us to work with that in any way, shape, or form on this panel. But so the voter ID thing, the problem that I have with it, and that's something I think would be interesting to talk about, is that not everybody has ID, and people's IDs can both be lost and taken away from them depending on what kind of ID that they use normally, right? You can lose your driver's license, and people oftentimes, especially in poor areas, don't have IDs on them and don't have IDs. So you would have to sort of unilaterally establish a system of identification in the U.S., but there's a problem with that. That our Constitution gives us protections against the requirement of needing to have ID. So you can't really do that. All the states are independent, on how they handle that and what you need ID for and what you don't need ID for. So there's not really a clean way of implementing a fair voter ID system that doesn't either run into problems with the Constitution from trying to unilaterally establish it, or end up in a situation where it's penalizing people who are poor and live in poorer regions.
Right, I agree with you broadly on that point, that it would be, there would be issues, but we have to compromise. We have to. It's a democratic system that we live in, and I see voter ID as the lowest threshold because they have all these other requirements. The more extreme you go in the movement of Stop the Steal, they have all these different requirements, like different times you can vote, whatever, during working hours. But I truly see voting ID as the lowest threshold, and I think that's the thing that will bring.
Are you talking
most
on
people.
state or a federal level?
So why would
It
that
would
be
have
the
to be
low? Okay,
federal.
so if I'm somebody who believes that my democracy has been stolen, Trump actually won, and the current president is a usurper, basically.
Right, and you'd be on the more extreme end.
Why would the lowest threshold for me? And keep in mind, this is the vast majority of the Republican Party believes this, and a sizable portion of independents believe that it was totally illegitimate. Why would the lowest threshold for those people be voter ID? Why isn't the lowest threshold Trump should be in office because Biden stole the election?
Right. So I'm not sure what study you are referencing when you say that most of them believe that the election was illegitimate.
And they all said the same thing.
Right. And I did read one that said that people believe that there was some, fraudulent stuff that happened, but not totally illegitimate. The amount that was totally illegitimate, I think in the study I read, was like 40%. But I mean, truly, the people that I speak to anecdotally, they believe that voter ID is the main issue. That's the main sticking point. And I truly believe, in my opinion, that is the one that will bring them over to
I think voter
have
ID,
more faith.
I think the voter ID is generally generally a bad position. Like, I think it's asked for in bad faith, but legitimately, I think the DMV has an awful system of getting people's licenses. I think that I would be in favor of it only if IDs were free, which I feel like they should be already, and they were as easy to get as like currently with my debit card. I'm in the middle of looking at a debit card. I can hit a button on my phone and there's one that's going to be mailed to me in a few days. Like, I think the ID should be that way in general, because I think identification is also like super important, not for like government spaces, but I just feel like for yourself. So like that would be the only grounds that I would agree to something like that, is if we made that process way easier than it is now, because I think that would serve like actual benefit to society as a whole.
So hold on. So we're going to Lactoid, we'll go to H9, we'll go to Cricket, then Zonia. But before we let that in, I find this so odd, right? Especially from some people who have in the past said, there's the what was the paradox of tolerance, right? That you can't tolerate the intolerant. Right? It's the same thing works for democracy. The people that we're talking about want to do away with democracy. Like, they don't believe in the concept that if the fascists among us, and there are fascists among us, get in charge, the first thing they'll do is get rid of your right to vote. Like on day one, and your right to protest, your right to organize, all those things disappear. So like this, and then and also to Bam, saying that like the U.S. is somehow special when it comes to like facing or surviving a fascist push. It is absolutely not. It's absolutely not. Trump should have taught you that. Trump should have taught you that you can easily undermine institutions. Institutions can only withstand so much, right? Like, we are lucky that we had the people in place that we did. It just came out today, right? That when there was that protest in Lafayette Square, that Trump was asking if he could shoot the protesters. If he could just shoot, why don't we just shoot the protesters? Seriously. And then like the Secretary of Defense said, well, yeah, we can't do that. That'd be pretty fucked up. And he says, okay, why don't we just shoot them in the legs, right? But it's only because we had some people with the slightest bit of integrity. What if we didn't? And remember what happened in Lafayette afterwards, right? Like they didn't like use lethal weaponry, but like they used incredible violence against those protesters. Remember that in Lafayette Park when they came down on them, cracking skulls? Like people were seriously injured, right? People were beaten. And that was just because of one man. He decided to do that. And he slowly kept replacing people. He kept saying no to them. He kept replacing them, looking for people to say yes. That was all that stood in the way. There's nothing special about the US. There's nothing special about the American people. The American people will, as was others, do as they're told. For the most part, right? Assuming that the fascism doesn't immediately like put you up against the wall, then most people won't actually struggle against it, right? Most people will just go along because their lives are more or less unaffected, right? And then by the time it is affected, then it's too late. So
America's way too big for that.
What'd you say?
America's way too big. It's 50 states. Like
What?
even if Trump actually stole the election, like California wasn't going to like, and it was in something way that we can notice. California wasn't going to fall in line under like Trump authoritarian presidency, and I'm sure New York
What does
and a lot
that
of
mean?
other.
Do you know what
I'm
that
saying
means? What does that actually mean?
I'm saying that like it literally, and when we think of the military, I think fascism works. It works in the places that it does because most countries are generally a lot smaller than the United States. The United States is way too big. People are way too spread out, and I don't think Americans identify with the country. I think Americans identify with the states and cities that they're from. So like if Trump tried to send out the military to overthrow Arkansas, I don't think the Arkansas citizens in the military are going to pick the military over the ground that they're from. Like America is built differently in that particular way.
This is the
Like we're big into
worst
state rights, whether you're conservative or.
This is
or
like
which
the
one.
worst argument. I can't spend time like deconstructing all of this. I'm gonna hopefully my panelists will be able to manage that. We'll go to Lactoid. People moved around on my screen, so it's gonna make things difficult. We'll go Lactoid, H9, I believe. Cricket Style J, Zonia, and Wick.
Okay, I'll stay on topic. Apparently, there's just massive political news that just broke. So Prime, I don't know if you want to take some time to talk about it after.
Yeah, Prime, I put it in the group DM.
Yeah, that's massive. So that's going to be something that.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Oh shit!
Holy
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yep.
New panel
Wait,
topic.
Hang on.
I'll-
say that to me again, because somebody just messaged me.
They've apparently struck down Roe v. Wade, or overturned it.
Oh, the thing. Hold on.
Yeah.
It says the Supreme Court has
Podcast.
voted to strike down Roe v. Wade according to an initial draft majority opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito and obtained by Politico. So it hasn't actually been officially published. So
Okay,
hopefully-
everybody get your abortions now, right now.
But this is it. Get your abortions in now. First of all, high five, Zonia, right? On that one. That was pretty funny. But this is it, right? What's gonna happen? If that's the case, right? Then this is the BAM, right? Again, yelling at BAM because it gives me so much fodder, right? If that's the case, what will happen? People are going to protest, right? If it's as bad, and I haven't seen it, I haven't looked at it, I don't know the deal,
There's gonna be
right?
riots.
We'll talk about it afterwards. But if that's the case, people are going to be on the streets and protesting now because it affects them personally, right? Like this is something that they can see, right? Or either affects them personally or affects someone they know, right? And then that'll do it. But if it wasn't for this, if the Supreme Court continued on with what they had usually been doing, right? Is slowly shaving away the rights to abortion rather than like this big leap, and people will be out in the streets. You can easily undermine democracy. One, by doing it slowly, and two, by just like undermining the parts that don't directly affect the public. Once it does, then you get that response, right? And how much of it do you get? How sustainable will it be? I don't know. The people in Hong Kong, they fought to protect their democracy, and they lost. They lost. I'm not so positive about all this.
Can I put a question out there?
Well, I can quickly make my point. So, Doobie, I empathize a lot with your skepticism of democracy, right? I think there are American institutions that are entirely built to limit democracy. The judicial system being one of them, right? The system of law is to limit majoritarianism, and constitutional rights are to limit majoritarianism, for sure. And when you're saying that we're going to disqualify these people from voting, I'm trying to avoid whataboutism, right? But I do feel like people are making this like this is an unprecedented thing that Republicans do, that Trump is just absolutely, off kilter compared to historical standards. I mean, I don't think people remember the riots that were happening following 2016 Trump's election. In 2016, what is it? It was 42% of Democrats said that the election was rigged. They said it was an unfair election, and the election was rigged, and they were telling the Electoral College to overturn the election. That's what they were saying. They were saying the court needs to overturn the election. It was 42, almost half. Now, 53% of Republicans said, the 2020 election was rigged. So I guess a little like, what is it? A little bit more, like 10% or so Republicans are crazy. But you understand that, like, if you're going to have this be the standard, like almost half of both Democrats and Republicans are going to no longer be able to vote.
Okay. Let's go. Oh, you can respond to me.
It's not. So first of all, I don't think Trump is like some special evil or something. He's just an easy way for me to piss off the lefties with what he's done. In fact, what we just saw in the Supreme Court, that you can thank Trump being in office for that, right?
Yeah.
So, this obsession with democracy, is going to lead to this kind of shit. People getting into office who shouldn't be there, who use their position to do terrible things. Right. So if you support abortion rights, right, you probably should have been in favor of not allowing someone like Trump to run for office. And we need to keep in mind how close we were to him getting a second term and possibly another Supreme Court pick. He was very close to winning the last election. He had more votes than Obama, even after all the shit he went through in the last 4 years, right, in his first term. And I think there's a lot of evidence that if we didn't have COVID, right, he would have fucking won, right? So, because the people, there'd been far fewer mail-in ballots, so he might have fucking won if we didn't have COVID. So I guess we can thank the Chinese for saving us from Trump. but we realize how close you guys were, right, to having this terrible fascist dictator stripping away all abortion rights and all this kind of shit, right? So you're very close to exactly the future that you guys are afraid of happening because you're so obsessed with democracy and allowing everybody to vote all the time. I don't know.
Your argument here. Well, real quick, your argument here is that that everyone's being obsessed with democracy, but the Supreme Court it's not a democratic, I guess arguably somewhat indirectly, but it's not supposed to be like a democratic system. It doesn't respond. That's the reason why they have life tenure, right? It doesn't respond to the will of the people.
Wait, okay, I don't think that makes any sense because, so far as I understand, Supreme Court appointees, right, are put forward by elected officials, voted on by other elected officials, right, and put into. So I would say it's like infected with
they can't be voted out.
They can be.
Well, under very, very limited circumstances, but they're given a life tenure. The idea is the same reason that is the idea given behind professor tenure, right? We don't want their opinions and their rulings to be determined on public opinion, right? Because ultimately this is a check against democracy. And so if the Supreme Court is ruling, against the majority here on Roe v. Wade, I mean, this is an anti-democratic, and depending on what your opinion is on constitutional rights, how they apply, do they apply more to, one side or the other? I mean, I think that's up in the air, right? But ultimately, this decision was it's an intentionally undemocratic system. It's not supposed to respond to the will of the people. It's supposed to uphold the Constitution.
Yeah, so I understand the line of thinking, but given that all along the way you have democratically elected people pushing certain agendas, right, to pander for votes, i.e., Trump putting forward somebody who'd be anti-Roe v. Wade to shore up his evangelical supporters, right, like Christian fundamentalist supporters, right? Despite his own position on abortion, right, it seems again like an issue that we're having right now, because Trump wanted to get votes from idiots in our country that shouldn't be voting, and now he put forward an appointee for that office, right? And they were voted on by other people who want to shore up their elections, right, in their states, so that those people vote for this fucked up person to get into this Supreme Court position, and now that fucked up person is making bad decisions that affect everybody in the country. Right?
Which
It's gonna
candidate, which SCOTUS person is fucked up, would you say? I mean, they all are pretty qualified right now.
Wasn't it? Did Kavanaugh get through? I think he did, if I remember correctly. There's him and the other guy whose name I can never remember.
Gorsuch.
The guy,
Yeah,
Gorsuch. The guy who presided over the case of the truck driver, so that he should have waited in the car.
Yeah, that's Gorsuch.
Should have waited in the car and froze to death, and because he didn't, he lost the case. Yeah, like I can't.
Gorsuch has ruled against the Republican Party on a whole
over-
bunch of times.
So we got a
two
few people. Sorry, we
three
got a few
have
people.
been waiting.
We got a few people. Yeah, we got a H9.
Yeah,
And
to
then
quickly-
sorry, what?
Then Cricket.
Oh no, I was gonna let you finish calling out who's next after me.
Okay, sorry. H9 Cricket. Wicket. Sorry, Wicket.
Wicket, okay.
Or Wicked. Yeah, sure. Azonia. Did I miss anyone? Okay, Leon. Okay, great.
To quickly hit on the point that they were just talking about, hopefully this gets the Democrats to become hardline voters, like a 65-year-old Republican. Like this is like, I hope this is the break, like the straw that broke the camel's back. Democrats need to vote every single election. They need to be out there. They need to show that their voice is heard. This would not have happened if the Democrats voted like Republicans. This just wouldn't have happened. All right, now to go back to what we were talking about. Voter ID is kind of dumb. Either you implement it in a racist way like North or South Carolina wanted to do, or you make it really accessible, like everyone can get an ID. And if everyone can get an ID, no one would believe into the system of voter ID because, everyone can just get it. It's too easy to get. Voter ID isn't the thing to solve the problem that the election system is stealable. You have to change the culture. In America, we have this culture of not trusting the government, or the government's trying to lie from you and taxes are theft. We have to attack those ideas. Those ideas are fucking brain rot. Brain rot. We have a system that is super effective in how we feel. When we vote for someone, they go into Congress and they vote right down the line of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, whichever party voted them in. They vote down the line. There's no like, Mitt Romney is an extreme case. And I'm trying to think of a conservative Democrat. The guy from West Virginia, I can't fucking think of his name. He pisses me off. Mitch McConnell.
No. Manchin.
Joe Manchin. These are very rare people. They don't cross the aisles. We need to have these people's voices heard. We have to attack the idea that the system is not working for us. It is. We are just so divided. We have to change our cultures. We have to look within ourselves to fix this idea. We can't keep looking outwards towards the government to fix our ideas.
We've been divided for a long time, though. I mean, there have been periods where we're less divided, but we've always been very, very divided.
But has the government ever fixed our divisiveness? No, we have to look inward.
But I mean, this is something that's been going on since the formation of the Union, right? So
I don't know if there was ever this bad of idea that like taxes are theft. The American system is up for sale. Anyone can take it.
There's the first half of the 1800s, which was exactly that.
I don't think we should be comparing
the war. So
I don't think we should be comparing our first 30 years to our next 30 years. That's just.
Let's go to Cricket. Wick, Zonia, Leon.
Yeah, thanks. So on the point about technocracy, I'm kind of halfway sympathetic to that because I agree that the majority of voters really don't know much about most policy issues, and I don't want most policy issues that require any kind of like detailed, in-depth knowledge to be decided by direct democracy. And so therefore, I think it's good to have a technocratic element to our state. I don't want to fight that, but I do think it's good to have an electoral check on the power of those people so that they're not going around making decisions in their own best interest at the expense of the rest of the public, or taking sides on issues of public controversy in such a way that they're favoring one group over another in a way that's bad. I mean, I think it's good to have technocratic elements, to have constitutional elements. They're just rules that we're not allowed to cross to protect certain people, and to also have electoral elements. And I think only by combining all of those, can we even come close to getting the best of all worlds. Even if that doesn't always work, I think it's better than just going with in any one or two of those alternatives. So then another point on the idea that democracy can lead to fascism. Obviously, yes, it can. And if we ever have a decisive majority of the public in favor of fascist policies and fascist leaders, then really, like, there's no institutional check that's going to stop them from succeeding. Like, if most people want to vote for a fascist that's going to remove their right to vote, then it's going to happen. So I think basically the best thing we can do is to try to move our culture and move our society as far away from from the point of having that set of opinions as we can, rather than put institutional checks in place that are going to fail to stop them if they ever do get to those opinions.
Okay, and the next person is Wick. Just been waiting really patiently. Thank you, Wick.
Yeah, sorry about earlier. My computer cut out and I had to restart it. Anyway, I think that overall, I'm actually going to agree that democracy isn't an end-all be-all. Right? There are certain decisions that should not be a democratic decision to make. And in this country, in America, we actually agree with that. And we have certain institutions in place that are very anti-democratic. The Bill of Rights, for example, is very anti-democratic. No one can vote on your right on what to say, for example. No one can vote to override your Second Amendment and things like that, though we can vote to put limits and things like that. So at the end of the day, we do recognize in America that there are certain things that we have representatives that are elected for and certain things that we don't, that are appointees and things like that. So when we talk about like removing and disenfranchising people directly just because we think they're crazy or stupid or whatever, this again leads directly down very dark paths. Can democracy, as Cricket once said, can it lead to fascism eventually? Yes, it can, but the quickest way to speed up that process is by removing people's democracy. So I want to try to expand it to give more people the right to vote rather than less, because I think everyone living under the rules of a system deserves at least some amount of say in that system. Yeah, and again, the Supreme Court thing just illustrates the importance of voting. I hear all the time on these places where people are like, "Oh, voting, you just vote. That's silly. I do direct activism and thing." And while that is important, voting is how we make decisions in this country overall. Vote, gang, vote.
And the next person is Zonia, and then Leon.
So a lot has transpired since I last was thinking about what I wanted to respond. One of the things I did want to bring up also, which I didn't get to clarify earlier, and I think it's kind of important to keep in mind, is that each of the states handles their own elections in their own way, right? So that's another thing to also keep in mind when it comes to anything like voter ID laws and stuff like that. Trying to do like a unilateral thing, which you would have to do in order to make it fair, is going to be nigh impossible because of the way that each state has its independence and how it handles elections. There are certain regulations that can be placed across the top by the federal government, but those are very, very limited in what they can actually enforce the states to do. So they can't actually do that when it comes to who's allowed to go and cast a vote. That's something that the federal government is not capable of implementing over the top of the states. So that's one problem. But then I also want to kind of be in unison both with Cricket and Wick, that like what Doobie is proposing, which is a more authoritarian type of government where you have expert committees that are making all the decisions. You got to hope that the problem with that is when there's not the ability for individuals to control and tweak that with the broader scope of the population's voting power. The problem is that then individuals who are able to accumulate enough power and influence can take over those committees and get their friends in there and get those who they will trust to do the things that they want to do. And inevitably, if the person or persons who have the monopoly on power are not in favor of you or the things that you want, suddenly you're living under a totalitarian state that is working against you. So that's never a good solution. You always want to have that broadening access to individual power and voting power, so at least there's variation, there's ebb and flow in who is controlling the democracy and who has majority power.
I just
Can I
want
respond to that?
to just piggyback just real quick on this, that idea that states should have the most say in who gets to vote is actually a good thing. One of the reasons our voting system in America is so strong is because it's decentralized. And it's very hard to manipulate it on at a mass level. You can do onesies and twosies here, but one of the reasons we don't see mass voter fraud is because it's so decentralized and it's so hard to tackle it, because every state has different regulations and rules, and this is actually a good thing. I think that while there are some federal changes I would advocate for at the general level, no. I think states having the right to decide how they go about it and the method that each local area does that would be best for themselves is a great thing, and something I stand. I would be opposed to federalizing the voting system. I think that's a bad idea.
Wow, Wick, we actually
Right,
just
so I want to.
Okay.
Sonia, did you say that one of the things the federal government, or sorry, one of the things that the states can't do is determine who votes? I'm sorry.
No, what the federal government is not able to control who it is can go to the polls. They have overlying, minimum requirements, but they can't say you have to make sure that only these people are going and voting in your elections. So the states have almost entirely full autonomy with their elections, right? And then those whom they elect goes up to, like the when it comes to the national elections, goes up to the electoral college, right?
Okay. Yeah. So I agree with that. Then I just misheard, because I mean there's
Not the other way around.
Who can vote is a very regional question, right? I mean, we all accept there's people that are currently disenfranchised that we think is a good thing, right? Kids can't vote. In some states, incarcerated people. In some states, mentally infirm people. There's all sorts of different restrictions on people voting. So, and kind of in line with that, I don't think Doobie is that far off when he says, well, I just want to expand the restrictions. I don't think that's like necessarily totalitarianism. I think you can have more voter restrictions and still be a republic.
Well, the scenario was like down the line, if you get to a point where people accumulate power and control those committees, then you have to trust that whoever has the monopoly on power controlling those committees has all the friends in committee, right? You got to trust that they at least have your interests at heart. And if they don't, and they're actually working against your interests, then you as a person are in a totalitarian state, because you have no ability to influence the changing of that committee to have it actually benefit you and have your interests at heart.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. Like some Wick said that I really disagree with is the idea of I'm not against the concept of states' rights, but I am against the concept of like when it involves a federal election, different people being held to different standards. That seems really weird to me. Saying that like, oh yeah, I went to jail, so I can't vote because I live in, I don't know, insert state here. But if I would happen to be, that if you live on the state line 20 miles down the road, then I would be able to decide who's president. That seems like a flaw in the system.
Oh,
I believe that there's.
It is. Well, but the states have their autonomy there. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I believe that like I said, I believe in states' rights. Generally speaking, for a lot of things, because I believe that I think the geographic location and region can give you some nuance to how an issue impacts people there. But the president is a position that impacts everyone on a it isn't niche, it isn't regional. So I believe the standards for that type of election in particular should be standardized.
Well, the problem with that is every local election is held a little differently. Like they have different ways of when they count the votes, how they report the votes, and how they collect the votes, and all these different things come into play when it comes to this. And one of the reasons this is important, even though there are flaws, I'm not trying to suggest that it's a perfect system. Obviously, it's not. But one of the reasons it's important to keep control in the local hands is because the local people best know how to deal with their own issues that they have, right?
What?
With their
No.
own- You don't think that's
Sorry.
true?
That's
No,
where it comes from.
it's
That's where it comes from.
Definitely
think
not.
that's
Why it is the
true?
way it is.
That's hon.
You
Before I
disagree?
get
Why do you think that I should be able to vote of how being I live in Pennsylvania, that I should vote for how California holds its elections? I don't think I should. I don't think
I
Abs
will
would have a say in that.
answer your question. But sorry, finish your point, and then I want to get Leon. Leon is actually the one in line. So finish what you were saying, Awake, and then I'll let Leon in, and then I'll respond
now
to
I
you.
can't. Now I'm waiting for your response. So go.
Okay. All right. Well, Leon goes first, right, and then I will respond to you.
Right. So to acknowledge Zonia and Wick's points, and everyone else who mentioned we live in a federal system. You know, the states decide for their own, and any solution that I might have or anyone else might have can't realistically be implemented federally. And I agree with that broadly, but I do think, you know, I don't want to get bogged down on that point. We can advocate for our own states' solutions to these things, and that's, you know, where I'm coming from. And to a question I wanted to pose, I put forward my solution. Doobie has his technocratic solution, you know, get rid of all the voters that he doesn't like and the crazies. H9 has his pie in the sky, change the culture, whatever that means, solution. Does anybody else have like a solution that they think would solve this issue that we're having with undermining, you know, people's faith being undermined in our democracy?
Was yours
I-
let the Republicans do what they want? Then they'll be happy.
Oh, mine was go after the voters and try to, you know, compromise, like you know, the good old fashioned democratic way, compromise.
Or you have an exam before people can vote. That's another way you could.
H9, you got a
Good idea.
response?
I remember those.
H9, you got a response?
Yes, I think it's really like naive that we can come in here and think, oh, this solution is gonna fix it all. Like, there's really smart people trying to fix this solution in elected positions and non-elected positions. I think we have to see that this, if it was really easy to be solved, it would be solved. This is an extremely difficult thing to fix. And like my idea of fixing the culture, yes, I think it's the hardest thing to do out of the two other things, but it's the thing that's going to fix it for good. If you get rid of the idea that the system is corrupt and broken, because it's not corrupt and broken, no one's like buying their way to an election in America. It's not happening. We
go
have to
ahead.
fix that idea.
Sonia,
Right,
you
and
have
I
a
agree with you. I
response?
do. I think the culture should be changed. I just don't see a realistic way to get there, which is why I'm trying to pose like a realistic policy step that we could take.
Sonia, do you have a response to them? If not, then I'll respond to it first.
Go ahead and do your response, and then I'll come
Okay, then we'll go to you.
Well, I
afterwards.
might want to respond to it, but go ahead.
Okay, it's just fine. Yeah, so saying that the locals know best. Yeah, disagree. We've seen the idea of locals know best, right? Like all through the South. The South knew best as to who to allow to vote, right? How to run their elections until we showed them otherwise, right? You need some sort of federal oversight. You can't just assume that people there will have the best interests in minds of those who are in their jurisdiction, right? That the majority will care about the minority. This has been the story of this nation, right? Of having to go over the heads of the locals, right? Like you just made like a states' rights argument, and I think you know better than that.
Look, but you're assigning these things, which I clarified at the beginning of my statement, and it was a long statement, so maybe you forgot that there are certain things that I do agree with you that need federal oversight. I think that there are certain exceptions that I would put in place where the federal government is allowed to tell states and should tell states, no, you cannot make laws like this. We will overturn them. We will overrule you in this case. But in the large portion of it, I do think that locals should have the majority of say, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that protects against is really bad federal laws. For example, if it wasn't just overturning Roe v. Wade, but the Republicans wanted to put a federal law against abortion. I would want the states to have the ability to say, no, that law is trash and we will not respect it. We don't want to go with this. And so we will not allow the federal government to have that kind of heavy-handed pressure. And for the most part, the federal government doesn't have that kind of heavy-handed pressure. There's only certain exceptions that we make. Wise exceptions, such as protected classes and things like that. So overall, I don't think there's so much daylight between our positions as you might think, Prime. I think that we're largely would be in agreement. I don't think you would allow the federal government or want the federal government to have the ability to tell that now everyone has to have a voter ID federally, right? You wouldn't want them to be able to do that. And so you want states to be able to make their own laws in that case.
If you had made that exception for the federal government, then, and I missed that, then I apologize. Well,
Sure.
no, I don't apologize. Never to you. I'm sorry, but like that. But then I understand. Then our positions are closer than I believe they were. Okay, Sonia.
Actually, I don't know. It's like everything I wanted to say has been pretty much cleared up now, so I feel like I wouldn't really be contributing anything at this point. So go ahead and we'll just move on.
H9.
Yeah, I think we have to be really careful about when we praise federal regulation or policies. Local policies are there to protect locals. They're always will protect locals. I think this is a big problem in America. We have NIMBYism, especially for me with power plants. California has pretty much closed every single nuclear power plant within its state border. It's really bad. It's a really bad idea. The idea that states can just go through and stop, change the national energy system is ridiculous. This should have been a federal policy where you can't get rid of your power plants because you don't want to, because it doesn't look good, or you're too afraid of a nuclear power plant disaster, which has never happened in America.
Okay. Okay. So
3 Mile Island might disagree.
Sonia.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking. I'm kind of thinking that as much as I would like, I think that when it comes to things like infrastructure, the federal government does play a very important role in getting the states on the same page infrastructurally, which is something that happened a long time ago, but doesn't really happen anymore, right? That's what happened with our interstate highway system. That was a federal initiative to get the states to the point where you could travel between states pretty seamlessly with a consistent mode of transportation. And that's something that I think could happen with something like energy. But when it comes to something like voting, that has a lot to do with the individual states actualizing their needs, effectively even their needs over that of other states. And I think that's a good thing. I think you sometimes need to be able to have that power. It's like, no, we as a state care about things that are different from what other states care about. And so we need to have that autonomy to make certain decisions. Voting is one of those things, especially when it comes to the logistics of voting and how it is that they decide when to vote and how to organize their voting. So much of that is regionally dependent and has a lot to do with how those individual states function as an autonomous mini nation, right? So I don't think you can apply that. I think that just these are not one-to-one. These are not apples to apples or apples to oranges in a way.
Back to it.
So Prime, I can see you're in disagreement. I actually share your disagreement, sort of. I do think it's odd that we on a question of federal importance, we grant localities so much power to determine how that federal question is answered. Right, because let's say you have some states that do it a stupid way, and then it turns out like they did it incompetently, and now like that was like the clincher, and now like the person who decides whether or not to bring the entire country into war was decided by the the incompetencies of a few or irregularities of a few states. Now, I'm not saying we replace state governments, right? States should have their own governments and localities should have their own governments, and they should get to decide those. But on questions of federal decision making, I don't understand why there shouldn't be a sort of uniform system there, right? Like, Wick, and this is where you're going to disagree with me, Prime, right? Because Wick brought up, like, well, what if like the federal government institutes like a voter ID program? I'm not sure I'd necessarily be opposed to that, right? The federal government should like start establishing minimum standards to vote. And I don't want to like shit the bed here. I brought up like an exam before. If you could do it in a non-biased way, maybe there should be like some sort of minimal competency to make decisions for the federal government that we kind of implement over the entire country. I think that
everyone should be able to read,
make sense.
right? Everyone should be able to read, I think.
I know that's a joke, but like at the same time, I'm not sure I want illiterate people making political decisions,
which
that
is
could
why
bring
we
the
should have
country to
literacy
war.
tests. I agree.
So,
no,
yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
I just want to respond to this real quick. This is why it's important to let states make their own decisions, because at a certain point there may be a time when Lactoid gets to make these federal decisions. Now you mentioned something in your
soon.
in your statement there, Lactoid, that I want to address. Like, what if certain states do it incompetently, right? I think that there's no real. That's not an argument against. For federalization, because and we can point to plenty of federal programs that I think you would agree do this, that are handled incompetently. So part of the reason why I'm standing states making the decisions, because it mitigates the risk. And so while there may be incompetent ways that states do it that are stupid or incompetent or whatever word you want to use here, they can only affect a locality. And so while it may be the clincher, that would just be bad luck. I think that there is more of a risk when we allow these things to be federalized totally and entirely infrastructurally, that it's going to lead to bad outcomes, because it won't only affect localities, it will affect the nation as a whole. So I'm much more in favor with risk mitigation.
Wait a minute. Let me just ask real quick, because I know you want to go back and forth. What risk is there from having a standard? I'm not saying, even if you don't want to have like a national, like people come down to handle the elections, like some federal worker, like officers. But I'm saying that, like, what's wrong with having a standard? Even if the state is doing it, the state has to meet up to this. This is the system that we're using. The problem with that, Bam, is that I don't want people outside of my state deciding my standard to a micromanaging degree, right? Like, obviously, I already said that there are federal exceptions that I think are good. For example, protecting supported classes and making sure everyone has they don't disenfranchise people based on exams or something silly like that. I think that those are good standards to have. But when it comes to things like, I don't want California or Texas telling me if I should have voter ID laws. Having this standard across the board isn't a bad thing necessarily, but I think it's less riskier to have it on a state standardized level than a federal standardized level. Like, what if they wanted to change the age to like 28?
It's proposed right now to 6. So constitutionally, you can't do 28, but there's some states that are proposing to 16 though. Some states want to drop it down to 16. What do you think about that, Wick?
I don't have an opinion on that. I go back and forth on that, to be honest with you, with the 16 thing.
I think the problem is, like, you could have some states that could just be like, well, we're just like not going to enforce security at our elections, right? I mean, where's the line? Like, how incompetent does a state have to be in running their election before you say, like, yeah, I guess like they shouldn't be making decisions for the whole country if they can't run this in like a legitimate way?
No, the SEC does have requirements. So it does have requirements on like how to handle ballots and ensure security. So like state election officials have to follow SEC standards, at least for that kind of stuff. But yeah, so because the SEC that's the role of the SEC, right? Is a federally mandated minimum for security for handling like ballots and such.
The Cricket.
Yeah, so the problem you brought up, Lactoid, where you say that a small number of people's incompetence can mess things up for everyone, while I agree that that's true, I really don't find it a compelling argument for or against any particular system, because I think you're going to have either that or some equivalent problem in every electoral system and every system of government. There might be ways that you can reduce it to some degree, but I just don't think it's actually the case that you can eliminate that with any realistic set of reforms.
I think that when you're talking about a federal issue, Like we're not talking about a independent state issue, right? We're talking about a federal issue, people elected to make decisions that steer the entire country, and steer entire future federal elections, right? These are things that should be like decided somewhat on a uniform scale, somewhat on a scale of like, we don't want a state not having these not having these requirements, and then that shifts the election in that state in a way that's like unfair everywhere else. I agree with Prime on the principle that I think it should be a uniform. Obviously, we disagree very much in the prescriptions of what we actually do to change the election, because I do have quite a few, but
yeah, that's fine. So you can have the opinion that it should be more uniform, and that's not really what I was trying to contest you on. I was trying to contest the reason you gave for it was that the system we have now enables a small number of people's incompetence to muck up the whole system for everyone else, and I don't believe that you can avoid that with any alternative system.
I think it'd be lessened. Maybe you can't get rid of it, but I think it'd be lessened. In the same way that we for state voting, we don't have like, or at least we shouldn't have like, villages making rules about who can vote on the state level of governments either. I think that there needs to be some level of uniformity as to, if you are living under a jurisdiction, there should be like a set standard for how you vote for that jurisdiction.
Well, there, like Zonia said, there's a minimum standard, right? There's a very minimum standard, very minimal, as I understand it, and there are very minimal exceptions as well. So there is a standard. You just want to make more restrictions in this.
Yeah, my minimum is much higher than the current.
And like I said, again, the idea that it's putting all your eggs in one basket, right? And so while if it goes right, it goes right everywhere. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's definitely something to be said for the nimbleness of allowing independent states to run a lot more of their, of their system, right? So there is nimbleness and flexibility in that.
Gooby.
Yeah, I just when Lacto had brought up the possibility of having like a competency tests, right, for voting, you guys all kind of laughed and rolled your eyes, and I'm wondering like why. Like what's so outlandish?
It's a good policy.
Okay, but you don't. Okay, but I think appealing to they did this in the past and it hurt black people is really silly. White people were hurt by those laws too, right? So, but I think we should kind of put that aside and determine whether or not it'd be a good policy going forward.
Yeah, I don't think we can.
Can I defend that real? Let me defend that really quick, right? We currently in American law say that certain people don't have the judgment to make decisions for the rest of us. One of those groups is children, right? We don't want children making decisions for the rest of us. How big of a jump is it to say, I also don't want somebody who, is completely illiterate or doesn't know anything about anything. Why should they make decisions to the rest of us either? I don't know. I think Doobie's right.
Because dumb people have their right to have a say in what laws govern them too. Just because you're dumb, like, look, we don't have a competency test to come on this panel, or else we'd have a much smaller panel, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, just because I'm not saying you Lactoid or anyone here, but especially on the open panels. Oh my God! But when we talk about why is voting important? Like that's the crux of the question here. And the reason that voting is important is because people deserve a say in the laws that govern them. Even dumb people, even if you don't understand the laws, you deserve
why are you making that assumption though? I don't. This is the problem at the core of like your issue, right? So you just make the assumption right off that they deserve to have the say, they deserve to have a voice.
I believe they do.
We just write that. Why? So if you've got a group of like 100 people in the county voting, and 50 of them believe that you should fucking have slavery, you will probably say, okay, well, hey, this is a great belief system to have, but it's not really reasonable. So we're not going to put this policy into place, right? But then if we had your democracy where everybody has a say, and you just, whatever the mob says, we go with, there are 51 of them, right? You would have slavery, right? Like, I don't understand why you're not comfortable just saying some people shouldn't have the ability to affect the democracy.
Because we already have restrictions. Like I said earlier, democracy isn't the end-all be-all. I don't worship democracy, right? And I think there are exceptions
Okay,
to democracy.
well then,
There are limits
what's
we
the
should have in
issue?
place to democracy, and I've already
Okay, so
outlined those.
you agree with
But the issue
some
the
restrictions.
issue,
What's wrong with the test as
because
a
just
restriction?
because I believe in some restrictions doesn't mean I believe in
Yeah,
every
I'm asking you what's
restriction.
wrong
Why
with
do
the
we have to go to
specific
these
restriction.
extreme binaries here?
It's
Just
that
because I
extreme.
believe in some restrictions doesn't
I'm
mean
not
I
saying
believe in every
at all.
restriction. I think the restriction of a law or a test, an exam, whatever you want to call it, and who can and cannot vote. I think that restriction doesn't serve a good purpose. Like, look, just because you could pass an exam doesn't mean you're educated on the issue.
Okay.
All right,
Okay, but if you can't
uh,
pass the exam whatsoever, we could find that you have like no competency, no knowledge whatsoever about how the system actually works, about what you're actually voting on, about what voting actually does, about any of these things, right? And if that's the case, then you shouldn't be affecting the government.
Because Doobie, it's like the argument is pretty straightforward, right? Like when you vote, you're not just voting for yourself. You are changing everybody else's lives. And there's a reason why leadership positions are given to the most competent, or at least they should be.
H9.
All right. In the court systems and then throughout society, we have this level of competency. I think it's 70 IQ. If you're below that, you can't be charged with a crime, or I forget what it is. But like we have this in society. Yeah. Yeah, it goes by state. And we have this in contracts. You're not allowed to get into a contract with someone who's mentally incapacitated or inept. You can't do this. And we could say contracts are way more powerful than a single person's right to vote. If I am a billionaire and I'm mentally incompetent and someone tricks me out of $1 billion, that's so much more effective on the American economy or society as a whole than one person's one-off right to vote. We have this level of competency already in America. I don't think we need to add another barrier to block people from voting, which is a constitutional right. I know there's a lot of gun-loving mother effers in here. They wouldn't take this for a second. They would rather die before someone puts a test in front of them to get a
Maybe
gun.
that's what needs to happen with some of these people.
I
don't really see if you're willing to murder people and to risk going to prison to have a say on where the local road goes or whatever the fuck, right? Like then hey, maybe you should be in a cage somewhere because that's pretty fucked, right? If you're that kind of person, then that's fine, die.
I request that the bars on
gun
on
owner,
my cage be purple.
The gun owner is also like I don't know if I agree with you, H9, that especially when it comes to like voter ID, it seems like the people in favor of or more likely to be in possession of guns are going to be more in favor of policies like that. I mean, ultimately, the responses to mine and Doobie's points here are just it's a constitutional right, which it's only a constitutional right for some people, right? Again, children are an example of people who don't have the right to vote because we don't trust their judgment to change the direction of the country or the locality, right? And we could change it, right? If we had enough political power, we could change it, and we could say, not only do children not have the judgment, but anybody who can't read a sentence also probably doesn't have the judgment, or anybody who doesn't have the competency to go out and get a voter ID probably shouldn't be making decisions for the rest of us. That's
I
just another way of
reject that
putting it.
framing on why we don't allow kids to vote. That isn't the only reason, right? There's a host of reasons we don't allow children who are under the guardianship of other people to vote to the way they do. There's a whole host, and combined, we just don't allow them. And I think it's good. I
What
wouldn't
is
want
that host of
infants
reasons
voting,
that
right?
and which one of them isn't related to the fact that they're either not developed enough to fully understand what they'd be voting on, or we just don't believe they have the mental competency to vote on this thing.
Well,
They're
it's the
under
same
another
reason we don't
person's
allow them to go into
guardianship.
contracts, right? In a lot of cases, there's certain contracts we just don't
Okay,
allow them.
but
Because they don't have the
that's
judgment.
so connected to the judgment thing. Yeah.
No, they're under another person's guardianship. I think
It's about
is a good
consent
enough reason
in that
to.
case, rather than
Wait, hold on, but
competency.
there are adults that are under other people's guardianship, right? For a wide variety of reasons, who still have the ability to vote. Right? So,
I think there's room for a discussion about whether somebody like that should be able to vote. Maybe.
I mean, you hear stories, and I know these stories are overblown, but it is a real thing that does happen, right? Of people going out to the homes of mentally ill people with like Alzheimer's, people with whatever, and getting them to fill out a ballot, or at least put a mark on a ballot that's already filled out for them, and say, "Hey, this is my vote," and this person has no fucking idea what's going on. Right. So I think at some point we need to acknowledge that there is an issue here and that we should restrict voting rights for some people.
And if they were
So,
tested, that could
Again,
happen.
we
About
do already. It's
one
just
thing-
again when we talk about like just because we have some restrictions that I should be in favor of all restrictions. That's just not true. It doesn't.
I'm not saying that. I'm
follow.
saying you should also be in favor of this restriction.
Well,
Yep.
again, I disagree for
Well, we
the
don't-
reasons that I think that people who are dumb and uneducated still have the, and this is my belief, this is my morals, right?
Cringe.
Is that they should have the ability to have a say in what laws govern them, and that's
So
why I
wait,
think they should
we
vote.
And
we
what laws
gotta
govern me?
we gotta move forward. Okay, so we'll go to our next case. So I
this
was
is
just
a topic
looking.
where we all get canceled.
Yeah, right. Pretty
Yeah,
much.
Wick
This
thinks schizophrenic should have, some say over the rules of the asylum before.
okay.
Certainly would make things more entertaining.
It would actually.